Hey guys, it's Dr. Hayes again, and I'm here to talk about Chapter 8 in They Say, I Say. Chapter 8 is called As a Result, Connecting the Parts. So the chapters so far in They Say, I Say have gone through all the different sort of steps of making an essay, how to establish the audience and the they in the beginning, how to find sources and support those sources and incorporate those sources into your essays in the middle. And then in chapter 7, what we just talked about in the last video was how to sort of close the essay with a conclusion that is meaningful and that gives your reader a so what. So now the subject that they turn to in the book is, okay, so you need some connecting language. So you've got all the parts that you're supposed to have for your essay, but maybe it doesn't flow very well. The connection, the connective tissue that you put into an essay sometimes doesn't even come in there until you edit it and revise it. Sometimes you don't, you're not worried about that when you're just trying to write your paragraphs. You're trying to get your introduction down, your conclusion down. You're not worried about if it flows well. Usually maybe on a revision phase or when you're editing back through it, you make sure it has the proper connective tissue if you didn't naturally just include it the first time around. So we're at that point, we're ready at this point in the text to talk about checking and making sure that connective tissue, those words that signal from sentence to sentence and from paragraph to paragraph, the road signs that the reader is going to follow so they can follow along and it'll make sense when they're reading, that your paragraphs have a logical progression through your thoughts. So that's what all of chapter 8 is about. It's very practical. There aren't any templates in this chapter for you to follow, but there is a list that I'll put on here and show you where it is. So they talk about I wanted to draw attention to the beginning of the chapter where they give this sort of example of the student. They call him Bill, I think. Yeah, Bill. Bill, who is not very good at transitions. He's not very good at transitional statements. And so he basically goes through the writing style of, my topic is dogs. What's a sentence I can write about dogs? Spot is a good dog. Okay. And then he goes, what's another sentence I can write? He has fleas. Okay. What's another sentence I can write? Dogs are fun. So like he even admitted, they said they talked to the student afterwards, because that's a very reduced, simplified example of the way Bill would write. But essentially what they're getting at is he had a topic and he knew facts about his topic. And so he would write a sentence. And then he was like, okay, that's a good sentence and it's true and factual about my topic. So let me write another sentence. So he would write another sentence in order. So each one of his sentences made sense in and of itself, like sort of in a vacuum. And none of the sentences were wrong per se. None of them were inaccurate or even off topic. They were all on topic, all inaccurate, but they didn't flow from one thing to the next. And so that's how the English language works, is that we need these sort of guiding phrases to tell us how one sentence is supposed to be read in context of the sentence that came before it. Sometimes this is very clear with just the subject and verb of the sentence and how it makes sense. We use pronouns to replace nouns so that a pronoun in one sentence connects it to the noun in the previous sentence. So there are ways other than just transitions that we use as connective tissue in English to put each individual sentence in context with the ones around it, right? That connective tissue, making sure everything connects. And so some of these things just come naturally. The use of pronouns, the use of a continued subject throughout multiple sentences. We kind of get the sense that they go together. But the two sentences, for example, Spot is a good dog, he has fleas. That doesn't normally go together. Normally having fleas is not a good thing. But it's not maybe Spot's fault. Like he could still be a good dog personality-wise and behavior-wise. But him having fleas is not evidence of his goodness, right? And so putting them side by side is confusing to the reader without some connective transitional phrasing in the middle. This can be with conjunctions like Spot is a good dog, but he has fleas. Or as they suggest, Spot is a good dog even though he has fleas. You could do Spot is a good dog, period. However, comma, he has fleas. Something like that like lets us know how the second sentence should be read in context of the first sentence. Again, that's a very simple answer. So the more and more complicated examples and sentences you get, the more clearly your transitions will have to be. So this whole chapter, has 4 sections about how to be connected, about the connective tissue, the connective phrases and stuff we use. They have, I'm only going to talk about a couple of them, but they have using transitions, adding pointing words like this or such, and developing a set of key terms and phrases for each text you write, and repeating yourself. So we're going to talk about a few of these things, just a couple in detail, and then mention the others. So as I'd already mentioned, the first section of the chapter is use transitions, which is what we've been talking about, these transitional terms. So there is a themed list of transitions. So transitions based on what you need, what connective message you need to send. So there's addition, things like also, and, furthermore, in fact, indeed, things like that, where you're adding, like this sentence adds to the first sentence. You have elaboration, so to put it another way, to put it bluntly, ultimately, in short, that is, in other words, those are elaboration transitions. Then you have examples like, for example, for instance, after all, specifically, case in point. You have cause and effect. Therefore, thus, hence, since. You have comparison. Likewise, similarly, along the same lines. Contrast. Nevertheless, nonetheless, regardless, however, despite, but, although. Concession, where you're like giving it like, okay, I'll admit this is true. You could say admittedly, or although it's true that blank, of course this is the case. How usually a concession transition statement is followed by a contrast transition statement, like admittedly such and such and such is true, however this and this is still important, that kind of a thing. So you'll learn, the more complex your writing gets, you'll learn to stack these transition words to form more complex meanings. And then the last one is conclusion. Therefore, thus, in sum, in conclusion, in short, consequently, to summarize, those kind of things. I didn't read them all, but there's a list here. The list of transitions, pages 105 and 106. So if you're looking through your book in the list of transitions, pages 105 and 106, and I will, if I can, I'll take pictures of the templates and transitions that go along with these chapters and put them in the video as well, so you can have the pictures. If you don't have the book and can't see the chapters, you maybe can at least see the lists of templates and transitions. So using transitions is one thing. The next section is using pointing words. The examples that they focus on are such and this. I wanted to take this example to talk about the word this. For those of you maybe who are visuals, this is the word I'm talking about. This, right? It's a very simple little word, 4 letters, this. That's the word I'm talking about though. The word this is very much overused in writing. And it doesn't mean anything if you don't add another noun to it. It is an ambiguous term, but a lot of people use it. And so a practice you need to get into when you're writing, anytime you use the word this, you need to add a what to it. This what? This idea is controversial because this new study is blah blah blah, because this statement cannot be proved. So a lot of times students use the word this, but they don't add a noun to it to say what this is. Usually using this in that way is confusing. there's sometimes it's clear within the context of the sentence, like what the this is, but if your reader has to pause at all, if they have to pause and go on a hunt for what you mean by this, that's bad. You don't want that. It can be solved, that confusion can be solved by just a very simple insertion of a noun. Instead of saying, this is a problem because, you say, this reality is a problem because, this state of affairs is a problem. This new idea is exciting because, right? Like, this fact is problematic in this way, right? So insert a noun so that when you use the word this, it's clear what you mean, because it's a real abstract word that is way overused. And so that's almost like a quick little fix to elevate the level of your writing, to not have any hanging thises that don't mean anything, and aren't clear. So that's just my little free advice for you. The next section I'm not really going to go into, which is, it's more of a stylistic thing. Repeat key terms and phrases. So, no, sorry, the one before that. You develop, I think it's, yeah, the one I skipped. There's one I skipped. Yeah, no, repeat key terms and phrases. That's the one I was at. Yep, here, I thought I'd skipped a page. So repeat key terms and phrases is the third suggestion that they give you. And that's more of a stylistic thing, like come up with some identifying words that go along with your study and just kind of repeat them over and over. And it gives your paper sort of a fingerprint, like it gives an identity as yours. Something that, you always use the same sort of terminology as you're going through. And it's not just talking about your topic. Like, if you're talking about obesity or veganism or stereotypes, not just saying veganism over and over, that's not a pointed word. But if you had, like, the example they give is from, they talk about Martin Luther King and how he uses the words criticism and answer over and over to form like sort of this artistic repetition. The criticism of this I will answer, and then I will this criticism I will answer in this way. So like he formed like this call and response pattern of repetition with certain words he used, and it gave it sort of this memorable identity. Like, oh, that sounds like something from the Martin Luther King Birmingham jail thing, because it's like this recognizable word pattern. I think that's like a stylistic thing. It's a little bit more advanced. It's not as helpful, I don't think, as using these transitional terms. Be careful of how you use this and make it more clear. And then their last suggestion, repeat yourself but with a difference. So this has probably been beat into you over and over and over in the English classes you've had, but an effective essay repeats itself. When I teach this class, I'm repeating myself. At the beginning of the video, I went through everything we've done so far so that it situates and gives context to what we're talking about right now. That's what you need to do in your essays. It might seem that you're being a little bit obvious, or that you're being a little bit condescending to the reader or pandering to the reader. Like they're smarter than this. They get it. But really, like, believe me when I say you need to spell it out. Like, you need to, in the introduction, this is the classic. I don't know if you ever heard this, and if you've heard it, sorry, but if you haven't, maybe it's new. Sort of this classic idea in persuasive writing or public speaking or anything like that is you tell them what you're gonna tell them, you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. That's the three parts of any sort of like persuasive communication in this way, whether it be a speech or an essay or what have you. So the tell them what you're gonna tell them, that's your introduction, where you set up your topic and sort of give a preview of what's to come. Tell them what you're gonna tell them. Then the body of the paper is where you tell them. Then that's where you actually lay out your information, present your findings, present your research, give your points. That's when you're telling them. Then the conclusion, tell them what you told them. So that's when you kind of recap with a new perspective. Okay, reader, you are not the same person that you were when you read the introduction of this paper. When you read the introduction of this paper, you didn't know all this stuff in the middle. Now that I've told you all this stuff in the middle, you're a changed man. And so now I'm going to talk to you as an enlightened individual in the conclusion of this paper. There's sort of a chronology there. That the beginning, they don't know yet. And so you got to tell them what's coming. Then through the middle, you blow their minds with all your new information. Then at the end, you're like, yep, this is what I told you. So now that you know that, now what? So what? Like we talked about in the last video, right? And so it seems like you're like, I'm saying the same thing over and over and over. But really the repetition is key to making your essay clear. They use the analogy in the chapter of a mountain climber who they don't just go from step to step. They make sure they establish a firm footing and a firm stronghold in the step that they're on, and make sure it's completely strong and clear and stable before they move to the next one. And when they're moving to the next place, they've still got a foot on the old one while they're getting their grounding on the next step, right? So that's how learning a new concept is too, and that's how writing your paper should be too. Make sure that we're secure in the one point while moving on to the next point, keeping one foot on the other one while we're still learning the new one to kind of keep us transition. Imagine, I think we've all seen Captain America. There's like the famous scene from Captain America. I think there's one in Spider-Man too, where in the Captain America, it's where he's holding the helicopter thing in one hand and he's holding like the building or something in the other hand. He's like, ah, and he's like holding them together. That's what you're trying to do. Like, this is the old concept that you're clinging to, and then this is the new concept, and your job is to link them together so that the reader doesn't fly away with like a whole new concept that they aren't ready for. So you might seem like you're being a little bit extra with transitioning clearly, stating, making your this is very clear and not vague at all, repeating yourself several times throughout with your transitional phrases and sentences, and connecting not just each sentence to each sentence, but each paragraph to each paragraph. It might seem a little bit obvious, but like many times I've read essays that like, this is the flow of this essay is not clear enough, but I've almost never, like your writers of your book have said this, and I agree, we as teachers, we almost never encounter an essay that's too clearly laid out. That just doesn't exist. If it's very clearly laid out, it's a good thing. And I've never seen one that's that was a little bit too clear, right? That doesn't exist. So if you feel like you're doing too much, don't worry about it. You're doing just fine. I'll let you know. Like, okay, this was a little bit extra. This was too much. I promise I'll let you know, but I guarantee you won't get there. So that was basically the main idea for chapter 8, is these 4 techniques for connecting all of the parts of your essay together and the sentences within each paragraph as well, making sure that all of your ideas flow in a logical way that makes sense and that your reader doesn't get lost. So I guess, the assignment for this one is also the same. Where you use your previous paper, like your informative essay, and sort of identify some of the transitional techniques you did, and see if you can pinpoint what you did and where you could be better. So I will also take a picture of this exercise and attach it on here so that you can see what the assignment is, even if you don't have the book. Okay, I think that's all I've got to say. I hope you guys have a good weekend if this is the last video you're watching, and I hope you've had a good second week of online school, and please reach out to me if you have any questions or have any issues at all. Okay, until the next video.